Welcome back to talknorth.com. Thank you for listening. If you can, please download before you listen. It helps our business. I'd also like to thank our producer, Brandon Morton, and let you know if you'd like to sponsor this program or any of the programs on the network, you can reach me at jsouhan47@gmail.com. talknorth.com is powered by Bite Squad. Go to bitesquad.com or download their app. Get food to your door in minutes. Use the promo code TALKNORTH to get your first delivery free. Talk North gets you your first delivery free.
Huge shout out to Minnesota's very own Joe Mauer. Unbelievable career, all-time great Twin. Looked like the guy was going into the Hall of Fame. He faded out towards the end because of injuries, but he gave this franchise his all, and it's a shame management never gave Mauer a legitimate chance at a World Series. How about Mauer catching the last game of the Twin season and maybe his career? That's how you do it. The biggest question is, what would have been if Joe Mauer and Justin Morneau stayed healthy? Well, here we go. Hockey season's coming up. What's it going to be for the Wild this year? Will anything ever change? I know what I'm getting in the regular season, but what will Barbecue Bruce give me in April? Whatever you do, Glenn Taylor, don't rush this Jimmy Butler trade. He has a contract. Make sure you get it right. Learn from your past mistakes. I won't sit here and name them. I don't want to ruin people's day.
You're listening to the Strom Sports Show.
And it's good to have you on board with us today on the great talknorth.com. You're listening to the Strom Sports Show. I'm Steven Strom. We've got a lot to talk about, and unfortunately, a lot of it isn't good right now in the world of sports with Minnesota. It's just not. I mean, at this point, you got a disaster right now with the Vikings, 1-2-1. No one thought it'd be like this. No one thought that the stuff would happen with Everson Griffin. And no one thought that this team would look like maybe their season is over if they don't win against the Eagles on Sunday afternoon. You go to the other side of sports, you got your Minnesota Twins and the firing of Paul Molitor. I don't agree with it at all. I don't know how you can win the AL Manager of the Year and the next year you're gone after your two best players that you expect to turn the franchise around in Byron Buxton and Miguel Sano. I mean, they were absolute frauds this year. Frauds. Miguel Sano was overweight, didn't come in ready, and that was apparent from spring training. You remember Jim Souhan actually reported that Miguel Sano looked overweight. He didn't look healthy, and this is what happens. Byron Buxton, yeah, give him a little more time because I guess he's only been in the league for 2-3 years, but it's just a huge step back from what it was last year. And a year ago today, because I'm recording on a Wednesday, the Twins were playing the Yankees in the wild card game. Just think about that, a year ago, and fast forward, you would have thought that the Twins would be back in maybe even in a divisional series because of how bad the division was this year. The Twins had an opportunity to actually compete for real with the Indians because they had an okay year. I mean, the AL Central is just god-awful. The Tigers, the Royals, the Twins, the White Sox, horrible. This is a complete missed chance, but I just have to talk a little bit about Molitor and what really went down here, and I think people are aware now that Thad Levine, he had a plan to get him out of here the second chance he could. I mean, he wants to bring in his own guys. He's this new millennial type of he's taking this millennial type of approach to the game. He wants to give in the analytics. He wants to have the Moneyball type story with the Oakland A's. But you know what? Sometimes, a lot of the times, that doesn't work, and players win game. And the players that they signed to come in here, Logan Morrison, Lance Lynn, Jake Odorizzi was okay. But, I mean, Logan Morrison, disaster. Lance Lynn, disaster. You had a couple of bad signings. And on top of it, Byron Buxton and Miguel Sano, AWOL. You're going to blame that on the manager? So now, you got to start all over. Who are you going to bring in? Who are you going to hire? Now, I've always promised you guys I'd bring in the most prominent guests and to try to give you guys the best insight, and I really have to pat myself on the back today because Michael Russo bailed on me last minute, flight got canceled, but I got the next best thing. I've got the sheriff of the network, Jim Souhan. Jim, thank you so much for coming on and giving me some time.
If I'd known I was just filling for Russo, I would have said no.
That's why I didn't say anything in the text. I just kind of played it off. Yeah. No, listen, it's a business out here. All right, so there's a lot of stuff that's going on in Minnesota sports particularly, and it's not very good. So I first want to begin with the Twins and the Paul Molitor whole drama. I guess he's being fired, but they're going to keep him in the organization. This is a guy who won the Manager of the Year last year. Tell me your thoughts on this and how you feel if this was a fair gig for Molitor.
Well, it certainly wasn't fair to Molitor. I think he's a very good manager. He's also a prominent figure here in Minnesota sports, Hall of Fame player who grew up in St. Paul, smartest player I ever covered as a Twins beat writer and feature writer, and revered around the game, sees things in the games that I don't think many other people do, including people in this front office. And what's clear now is they were always going to go with their own hire. They always wanted to move Molitor out. They got the job. Molitor was the end of his contract. The management said, okay, you're going to keep Molitor for a year. Then they trade away people the trading deadline last year. In 2017, he somehow leads that team to the playoffs. He wins the Manager of the Year award, and they go, okay, crap, we can't fire him now. So then they know they have to do a deal with him if they're not going to fire him, right?
Right.
Well, he insists on a 3-year deal. So they give him a 3-year deal. So here you have a guy with a 3-year deal at good money, reigning American League Manager of the Year. And frankly, I let that fool me into thinking that they weren't going to fire him. But they were always looking for the first opportunity to fire him. And they got that opportunity when they traded away players at the trading deadline and the team really was out of contention. And, I know that they have some reasons that they believe were legitimate in terms of the reasons why they let him go. They really wouldn't speak to it during the press conference, talking to people behind the scenes. Sounds like they weren't always thrilled with the way Molitor's coaching staff operated. They weren't thrilled with the performance of the young players, and they decided that their own person would be the better conduit to those players. But is it fair to Molitor? No. I think Molitor did about as well as you could do with a pretty lousy team he was handed.
I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, everyone knew when Thad Levine came into this thing, he wanted to do it his way. He wanted to hire his own guys, and he just couldn't do it. And he tried to get him fired last year by trading away players, but you couldn't have fired him last year because of the Manager of the Year, because you led a team to the wild card game. So let's talk about that real quick. A year ago today, the Twins were playing. I'm recording this on a Wednesday, by the way. I know it comes out on Sunday. But a year ago today, you were in New York ready to cover the Twins wild card game. Now, you look at this franchise. Molitor's gone. Mauer's retired. Buxton and Sano can't stay out of Rochester. What direction do you see this franchise headed?
Well, I think that also speaks to what Falvey and Levine are trying to do. I think they came in and said, okay, this organization is a mess. It's going to be a 5 to 10 year rebuild. Let's start from scratch. Let's rebuild from the ground up. Let's hire 1 million analytics people. Let's upgrade our computer software. Let's get new scouts. I think they looked at it as, okay, we're not going to win for a while, so let's just rebuild it all. I think going to the playoffs last year kind of messed up their plan because their plan was to trade people to get younger prospects, to build up a team in their own image, or at least what they think is their own image, to win 3 to 5 years from now. And all of a sudden they go to the playoffs and they have Buxton Snow playing well, and Molitor's the Manager of the Year. You have to sign him to a 3-year deal. So that's why they went out and got players like Morrison Odorizzi, Lance Lynn, Addison Reed this winter, who, by the way, at the time they got them on pretty good deals coming off good seasons.
Right.
It didn't work out, but at the time it made some sense. So I think once they got to midseason this year and they said, okay, again, we think we're not in contention. We're going to trade away people at the trade deadline. I think they went back to their old plan, which is just going to be a long rebuild. Let's get rid of Molitor, bring in our own people, and do it our way.
2 things on Buxton and Sano before I move on here. How much more time do we give these guys? I mean, seriously, how much time do you really give Miguel Sano? I mean, when it comes to weight, at least we know Byron Buxton, it doesn't have a weight problem or anything like that. I mean, that's just discipline at this point. What do you do next year if it's the same old Sano?
Well, first of all, his weight was a major problem. He has gotten the weight problem out of the way. He looked good toward the end of this last year. He looked like,
he's never going to be a skinny guy. He's a big, strong, powerful guy. He's built like a defensive end, but he looked like an in-shape defensive end instead of a sloppy defensive end by the end of the year. So the weight problem isn't at the moment the main problem. The problem is that he went from being one of the smartest and best hitters in the major leagues to being an easy out. He needs to get that going. Buxton, similarly, he's a fantastic defensive player. He's a great guy. Discipline is not a problem for him, but he takes terrible at bats. They both need to learn how to hit. So you don't give up on these guys. They're immensely talented. They aren't costing you any money. They have no value in the trade market. They both still have listen, Buxton has hit 9 home runs in a month. He has carried a team for 3 months.
Yeah.
Sano has been an all-star. They could still be the players everybody wants them to be. You cannot give up on these guys now. It would be like, it'd be like giving up on David Ortiz when he struggled. It'd be like giving up on Justin Morneau. Justin Morneau, David Ortiz, Torrey Hunter, you go back and look at their careers, they were terrible, and then all of a sudden they were great. And you would have made a huge mistake by giving up on them. So you don't give up on them. You work with them. You try to get as much out of them as you can because they could still both be all-stars.
I agree. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about Joe Mauer. Obviously, not obviously, but this may have been his last career game. It kind of hinted towards that when he came out and caught a pitch in the 9th inning. I want to ask you this. I know Hall of Fame's out of the window. I've talked to people out here. They shut it down really quickly. I understand. He had an unbelievable first couple of years, but he really kind of tailed out towards the end. Where do you rank Joe Mauer in terms of all-time, twin list? Is it top 5, top 10? Where do you have him on your list?
He's somewhere in the top 6. Killebrew, Puckett, Carew are the easy top 3. It gets a little tougher to place people after that. You have Tony Oliva, who was brilliant for 8 years, then hurt his knee and went from being one of the greatest players ever to being a guy who wasn't very good because he couldn't run anymore. You have Kent Herbeck, who won 2 World Series as a very good player, but didn't put up huge numbers compared to other, long-term first basemen. Then you have Mauer right in there. And here's the thing. My gut reaction, my initial reaction when people have asked me this last week, is Joe Mauer a Hall of Famer, has been no. But then I went and did some research, and I started comparing his numbers as a catcher to other people as catchers. Then I started looking at the historical achievements. No American League catcher had ever won a batting title before Mauer. Only one player ever had won a batting title as a primary catcher before Mauer came along, and he won 3 in like 6 years.
Yep.
He was an MVP as a catcher. He had one of the highest on-base percentages ever as a catcher. And so he was not just Hall of Fame, but he was first ballot all-time great Hall of Fame great for about 6 years. Then he was still all-star caliber great for about now my TV's doing it. My good Lord, I don't know what the hell's going on. So he was all-time great for 6 years. Then he was still very, very good to great for about 3-4 years. And then he had the concussions. Then he had to switch positions. And then he didn't measure up as a hitter. As the downturn in his offensive production didn't match up with him being a first baseman. And then he became a average to below average major league player. Here's the interesting thing, though. If Kirby Puckett's in the Hall of Fame, Joe Mauer has an argument because Kirby Puckett was a dominant player for 10 years, had the eye problem, didn't play anymore, and because he couldn't play anymore, didn't amass numbers that really matched up with other Hall of Fame outfielders, and everybody gave him a pass because his career ended quickly.
Right.
Well, if you give Joe Mauer the same pass for having a downturn in his career after about 10 years, and you look at, again, you compare his numbers as a catcher to other players as a catcher, he's got the 3rd highest OPS as a catcher in Major League history.
Wow.
That's pretty good.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's a good job by you looking up the stat. That's a really good job. All right. I want to talk a little about towards the end of his career. What do you think happened with this guy? Because I got all my Minnesota haters are he might have used steroids. I don't believe Joe Mauer would ever do that. What do you think his downfall was? The concussions? What do you think caused this?
Concussions mostly, also some mystery ailments that he and the team didn't do a good job of getting out in front of and explaining. Listen, Joe was revered, and he was one of the great players in the game. In 2011, he wakes up one day, he's having problems with his lower back, his legs. Nobody really knows. Ron Gardenhire, the manager, comes out and says he has bilateral leg weakness. And that phrase has clung to Joe Mauer and made him sound like a wimp his entire career since then.
Okay.
Here's the problem. There's no such thing as bilateral leg weakness.
Yeah,
he made it up. He made it up. He didn't know what he was talking about.
Oh,
he shouldn't. So that phrase has really killed Mauer. And now listen, I did stories on Maurer when he's a young player where Torrey Hunter or Rick Stelmazzi or somebody else would come out and publicly on the record tell me, hey, he's got to toughen up. He's got to play 6 days a week instead of 5 or 7 instead of 6. Listen, you can make the argument maybe he should have played